Week number 6, you'll be covering chapter number 8. Chapter number 8 predominantly looks completely at Africa. In terms of historical knowledge, historical study, in a lot of ways, Africa is still very much a dark continent. The history of Africa is one that has been written about and discussed and debated by historians for centuries. One of my classes when I was in graduate school that I learned the absolute most in was the history of Africa. And one thing that you need to know about the history of Africa as you're going into this chapter is it looks at a lot of the other early civilizations outside of Egypt. In other words, it's going to look at the Numidians and, of course, the Kushites, which end up becoming the same group of people over time, those who live in modern-day Ethiopia. Also looks at some of the beginning of other civilizations, especially on the western coast of Africa. As we get later in this course, for example, there'll be the blight of Benin, which will be utterly decimated by the slave trade. You'll be looking at the Congo and the Congo River Valley. I tell my students in the face-to-face class that I am a huge fan of Jeremy Wade and his show River Monsters, and all the trips that he's made to Africa, amongst other places. Seeing some of the things that have come out of the water, so to speak, in Africa, utterly fascinating to me. If I were to sum up the history of Africa to you in about 15, 20 seconds, here it is very simply. Africa is very diverse. It's very divided. Many, many, many different cultures, languages, civilizations. And throughout the history of Africa, the local chiefdoms, the local tribes, have been the most important organization in terms of the civilizations. One of the reasons why there's a lot of violence and things like that happens in Africa still today can literally be traced back centuries. Just to give you an idea that, truly you want to understand the present, a lot of times we got to dig very, very deep into the past. Towards the end of this chapter, it also looks at Islam, again, as we talked about in the previous week's folder, with Islam coming into the trade routes, especially in Northern Africa, dominating Northern Africa, primarily where it still does today in terms of being the main religion of that particular area. Competencies, again, we'll be looking at competency number 1, the characteristics of the major civilizations and their geographical and temporal settings. Also be looking at number 7, the individuals in the world. And then also, again, number 4, tracing the development of traditional civilizations and recognize their enduring influence. And again, with Africa, this is very important. Many places throughout the world in the Pacific, the Middle East, Afghanistan is another really good example of how these local tribes, these local chiefdoms were the most important thing in the world to these people. And a lot of times the rivalries and just sometimes brutal violence that we have a hard time understanding dates back centuries. This may be a difficult chapter for you to really follow through, but it's really, really some good content. And can give you an insight into the African continent. Good luck, happy learning, and week 6 is upon us.